So obviously talking about the Trump administration or the philosophical underpinnings behind fascism or anti-fascism feel quaint or useless or something like that sometimes. But a thought came to my mind and I wanted to share it as a way to kind of maybe weave a thread back to where we were before we were with Trump, or where we could be if we had a government that worked or that wasn't trying to amass power and change into an engine of profiteering and revenge, etc., for a specific person. I was reading a little article by Secretary Pete Buttigieg. I call him Mayor Pete, like a lot of people do. And I didn't really get that deep into the article until I saw a word that led me to the idea of this video. And that word was public service. 2 words. And it reminded me that one of the ploys of fascism is to act as if all politicians are crooks. And I think people look around and say and believe and think things like that in the same way they feel like a used car salesman or a lawyer is always dishonest or something like that. And those things just aren't true. Some of the things we have in common with each other is we don't want to deal with a car salesman because we know they're trying to sell us and they're so good and we feel like we're going to get tricked. Or an attorney just wants our money or whatever it is. But if you think about it, that used car salesman, his job is to sell cars. You went to the car lot. The attorney went to all this schooling, knows the law, and their way of making money is by serving customers in court cases. So we like to disparage certain groups by rote. And, I'm a realtor, and people like to think that realtors are liars or crooks or whatever too. So it's easy to generalize, overgeneralize, and then as a result dehumanize these characters because now they're just a caricature. Oh, you're just a realtor, an attorney, a used car salesman. Oh, he's a politician. And so they're no longer an individual that happens to work in this field where there's potential for corruption or misunderstandings or what have you, everything in between. So we look at that and say, oh, that's a common thing where we hand down these things. And we can also hand things down racially, that this group of people is, titled with money, and these people are lazy, or these people are smarter. Asian kids are smarter, and all these things that we'd like to overgeneralize and believe. And so usually they're dehumanizing anti-Semitic stuff that has been handed down for generations, and or sometimes they can be humanizing, but still, even with the Asian kids, you're generalizing. I'm sure there's non-smart Asian kids, and it's just kind of grouping everyone together by where they're from, or acting like there are essential traits to people, that women, men, this race, that religion, that don't hold up, and that really are designed to dehumanize one group, in-group, out-group, and or separate us all of the above. So fascism wants to do this for lots of reasons. Stir up controversy, stir up anxiety, and any in-group or out-group, there's anxiety. The Jews are behind this thing, that type of talk, and because they're a minority party. So they're coming up as a minority, they've got to separate everybody and slowly get the moderates over with fear. The border's going to do this, MS-13's coming through, and they're, the trans kids, taking over your bathroom and all that kind of stuff. So slowly there's an atrophying of those against the dictator to be. And he slowly wins over the old, the weak, the ignorant, the racist, those who are in fear, those who think that he's going to make them a lot of money, and etc. So when it comes to politicians specifically, though, it's not exactly the same as just saying, hey, the Jews this, or black people this or women that or liberals or vermin and all these types of things. They all have a specific purpose. The liberals or vermin is kind of so we can dehumanize them so that they can now be targeted through political revenge, through laws, rules, through sending them to jails, flimsy charges, and all that type of stuff. But when it comes to politicians, let me finally get to my point here. Politicians are targeted for multiple reasons. Now, you might get revenge on this politician or that. Let's throw this one in jail, lock her up, that type of stuff. But really, there's a general attack going on politicians and politics itself. First, it's saying, hey, politicians are all greedy and corrupt and lying and liars and not working for you. There's no public servants. There's nobody that just goes out and works really hard every day to try to make the world better, to try and act in our stead, to pass laws to protect us, to speak for us internationally. No diplomats, So it's when you say politicians, well, what about the diplomats that go and negotiate treaties that help us or protect the environment or speak for us and etc. So that's all washed out. That's all out the window because we're talking about how they're crooks. And so we're dehumanizing all those politicians, national, local, state, or whatever. And then you might have some caveats. Well, my local guy's okay. I met Jim and he does this. And yeah, he did make some money developing, but he's good. So the closer it gets to you, the easier it is to humanize that person. But the further away, they're just a caricature. So first, that they can say, hey, we're going to get these liberal politicians or whatever. But it also makes you not believe in politics. And so you wouldn't mind seeing politics go away. Well, the dictator can't wait to give you that Christmas gift, because if you have a dictator, politics does go away. Now, there's show politics like in China and in Russia, where some people have ceremonial power or real power, like the King and Queen of England. They prance around, but they don't really do anything, and they don't really have any power. And it can be like that, and it usually is like that in dictatorships where there are elections that don't really mean anything, so it's all for show. And as well, it's not just the generality of, hey, I don't want to have politics anymore, but that politics are so corrupt and politicians are so corrupt that I don't mind another corrupt politician coming along, because he's the one that's going to clean it up. Or it takes a crook to catch a crook, and all these kinds of truisms that aren't really true. There have been plenty of very good police officers and etc. that have caught crooks that were never crooks. So we love to kind of sell ourselves on this idea that we need the bad guys. And so eventually, all these guys are bad guys, scummy swamp creatures. But then my guy, he's going to come in and clean that up. He's lived a life of luxury, of all this money from his father, ruining businesses, raping women, mistreating people, not paying his staff, not paying people that work on his buildings, losing all these businesses, bankruptcies left and right, and just kind of being a cheater and a shark. But all of a sudden, that guy's going to come and say, well, but now that I'm president, I'm going to do right by you guys, because I suddenly found religion, or, the idea that, well, there's so many crooks out there like Putin that we need our crook to go fight their crooks. And I guess in some sense it's true, you do need a tough person out there, but it doesn't have to be somebody like Trump who is, fake tough and full of shit. So the idea that these politicians, all the regular politicians, are all scum, first of all, dehumanizes them. You don't mind them going away, going to the gulag, getting targeted for revenge. You don't mind losing politics in general, because your leader will do it all for you, and you don't have to worry about which side's good. You can kind of turn that off. So that's nice. You can just worry about your life, and your leader's got you until 6 million Jews are dead in Europe. And you say, wait a second, we didn't sign up for this. And then people could have said, well, yes, you did. And that's where we are. That's the inflection point where we are, is that it's going to turn into something. It's not all this Sturm und Drang that is dredged up by the demagogue is going to go somewhere. It's going to turn into something. It's all this potential energy, like this, giant snowball at the top of a mountain that's being pushed up the mountain. As it gets pushed up, it grows and metastasizes, and then eventually an event or events let it go, and then a giant tragedy happens, like Hitler's concentration camps or World War II. I mean, there were two different things that happened at the same time. Either one of them would have been the most disgusting thing that had happened in the 20th century. But what he did is both. Let's kill 6 million Jews and everybody else that we think are miscreants, and then let's start a world war so that 20 million more or so can die. And then, so it's astounding what happens when people grip power, try to claim power, try to not let it go, and then try to go get power in other nations. And World War II is about revenge too, about revenge against France and the Treaty of Versailles and how poorly it treated Germany. So, acting like all politicians are bad and dirty and not public servants and not trying really hard, etc., allows you to just think that politics itself is kind of bogus, and my guy, well, he's got this, and he'll take care of them, and he'll take care of politics in general. But now those people aren't humans anymore. So the politicians aren't humans. So there's dehumanization part one. And that's what they did with the Jews. Oh, the Jews are, using lending practices that are this way, or they're clannish, and all these things. And I guess that goes back to the Jews killed Jesus. So somewhere along the way, this just kind of held on. And so now, well, the politicians are bad. They're all bad, except Trump, who's not a politician, right? Except he's been president for, 5 years. So when does he actually become a politician? Never. Because then he'd have to be one of those politicians. But he's not. He's a businessman. He's a leader. He's a tough guy. So the rules don't apply to Trump about being a politician. So, all right, politicians, they're bad. Jews, he definitely references Jews a lot, and that they should support him, and they don't, and all these things. So they're pretty bad still, except for Israel, so that Israel can bring about the end of the world. And so we can sell, we can sell Israel all these weapons and etc. And then, well, the liberals are vermin, so they're bad. They're dehumanized. Check them off the list. Illegal immigrants, they're all dehumanized, so check them off the list. Send them wherever they want. The nice thing about the illegal immigrants is that lots of people look like illegal immigrants. How would you know who's illegal when you're walking down the street? So I always ask people, hey, where are you from? And they'll say something like Venezuela or whatever, and I can tell they're like, why are you asking me where I'm from? Because it didn't used to matter. I used to just ask them, hey, what's up? Cool, I speak Spanish a little bit from school, and they kind of chat, chit-chat, getting to know people. Now they think I'm trying to sell them out to the government. And so there's all this fear and all these things. And too many Hispanics are voting for Trump and think, oh, he's going to fix everything. It's just like the white Southern poor men in the 19th century and on, kind of going along with slavery and Jim Crow and segregation, etc., because they felt like it served their interests, but they weren't being helped by it. They were just going along for the ride with the aristocracy. They were on the wrong side of things. They weren't getting wealthy or being taken care of. So everyone's always a dupe, when it comes to things like this. And so you're getting duped into saying, well, women, shouldn't have power. Why should these women be in the military? Defense secretary is saying things like that. And then you've got, LGBTQ people, they're, trans people, they're taking over the bathroom. So all these kind of tempests in a teapot, there's really nothing with any of these groups that's a big problem. Are there some people coming across the border that shouldn't be? Yeah. And there's probably some highlighted cases where these guys are in a building in Chicago, and so that means that we've got to go to all these extremes. And it's too bad that liberals and Biden and whomever couldn't just take that a little bit more seriously and just say, hey, we're going to not let this be a free-for-all. But I think if you look at it clearly, it's really not. I mean, Obama was, we called him the deporter-in-chief. Biden was similar. And so it's not like it's being portrayed and certain cases being highlighted and this crime in Chicago means all these things. So it's not that crime in Chicago or other places doesn't need to improve, but what people don't realize is that demagoguery like this and the military going into these cities, these are vehicles for a power grab, for consolidation of power, and not so much like, let's make Chicago better. Notice they're all liberal cities. There are cities that are Republican run and states that are Republican run, with cities with higher crime rates that are not being taken over by the National Guard. So these are flimsy arguments, even if there is real trouble in these areas that needs to be addressed and perhaps needs to be revisited by whoever's the mayor, whoever's the governor. But also, those cities and etc., a lot of the issues are systemic since we no longer have as much manufacturing here with cheap manufacturing across the globe. These cities that used to be engines of our economy are kind of sold out to these other nations, and both parties were behind these free trade agreements that weren't good for us. And so it's more like, well, what are the systemic reasons why we have drug this or crime that or unemployment or et cetera, education? So if we were to truly look at those things, we would say, well, the city problems are complicated, and does bringing in the National Guard, is that the answer? What are the ups and downs of that? Is that a good thing for our nation or for that city, or is that a power grab? And does that now become the norm where we just have, we've got our army in our cities, and is that really kind of designed to consolidate power and show strength, but is it designed to bully and intimidate and taunt those who disagree with the government, the federal government? Because the hypocrisy of it all is that the conservatives, the Republicans, have been talking about big government, how bad big government is. But they can't wait to welcome in a big government to do the bidding of the stuff they want, which is not conservative. It's not conservative to have the National Guard in those cities. It's not conservative to send people to private prisons in Central America. So the hypocrisy knows no bounds. They're talking live and let live, conservatives, small government, more focus on local and state government. Well, this is the opposite of that. So they don't mean that. They say they want to lower the debt, but their tax cuts raise the debt trillions of dollars over the next 10 years. So they don't mean that either. So they don't mean what they say. And I'm not saying the Democratic Party is the answer, because they've both been taken over by big business, but at least they try to do things that help poor people, the people that are trampled by business. They felt like in the 80s they had to join the Republicans to take big money in order to compete, and maybe they were right. Maybe something needs to happen, maybe a third party, etc. But in the meantime, they say this is a two-headed monster. Well, not really. One head is kind of a pro-business conservative party. The other one is fascist. And the fascists don't want you and me to have any more. They don't want us to truly be free. They want to take power for the specific person and his family. And they don't want to let it go. So it becomes their country. So they're like trying to take over the country. You think they're trying to clear out the rabble? Maybe they want to clear out the rabble. Maybe Trump likes the idea of sending brown people overseas or making this whole thing kind of a Trump country club. But what he really wants is power. And also, like every dictator type, he wants to evade responsibility and accountability for his crimes, for his business deals, and, etc. So there's no rationalizing the choices of somebody like Trump. He says it all over. He's made his things very clear, and people like that. That's the bottom line. Is at the end of the day, just like in Germany and Italy and everywhere else, they want a strong leader to take over so they don't have to worry about it anymore, because they're sitting there doing their physical job, they're raising their kids, they're trying to make a living, taking care of their house, their property, they want to go to church, and it's just too much. So it's really easy to say, let this guy handle it, let this strong man handle it. Wow, our champion. He'll be our champion, because there's a bunch of other strong men on those countries, and we need ours, and is there ever a time where that's true? Yeah, maybe. Sometimes, sure. Like Churchill. But Churchill's a different kind of strong man. He wasn't trying to hold on to power. He was just a strong man. He wasn't a strong man. He was a strong man. There's a difference. So sometimes you do need a singularly powerful leader in a difficult time, like Zelensky. But Zelensky's going to let go of power when the war's done, when he's done being attacked, by an invasive Russia, which is a Goliath to their David. So this idea that we need a strong man, we can even accept that. But the difference is that somebody like Zelensky was elected and has only shut down certain things because he's at war, and he was attacked from an outside country with millions of times more power and prestige, economically, more landmass, more people, and way more military might. And they're holding their line because they have help from people, and I assume Israel's a secret thing, and I don't know why, but I just think that. So, it doesn't mean that we don't need a strong central, general commander-in-chief to do the thing, sure. But there's a difference. There's strong men, and then there's strong men. So, just to kind of bring it back to the whole original idea, it's like, look at your politicians and don't assume that they're shysters. If they are, elect somebody else. Find out about them. Try to see what they do. Somebody like just running for president, you go over travel the nation and do all these talks and all these shows and debates, and that seems like a bear. For years you're running around the nation, and you do it again and again. So I'm not saying that they're not necessarily narcissistic and wanting power and et cetera, but there is sacrifice, locally, state, nationally. There is sacrifice, and often, like with somebody like Pete Buttigieg, these people care. They're Rhodes Scholars. They are studying this. They want to make the transportation system work better. They want to modernize our government. They want to make it of the people and by the people and for the people. And sometimes that's really messy. And not easy, and it lurches, but at least it's not overtaken by a force that now you got to fight to get rid of. And that's where we might be with Trump. It might be hard to get rid of him. And it also may be hard to get rid of the mistakes he's made, the damage he's done, and the financial and human costs of the choices he's made. So consider whether you really think that politicians are scoundrels or corrupt, scum, liars. You don't know them. You have no idea. Maybe half of them are. Maybe 10% are. Maybe 13% are the good guys. It's just like cops, Oh, cops are this way. They're brutal or whatever. You don't know that. I know cops. I know a handful of cops that are really cool. I've had bad incidents where I didn't like how an officer was talking to someone or something like that, but these generalizations dehumanize whole swaths of the population. And being a police officer is not an easy job. And I know all about the history of going back to slavery and etc. I know racial history in the 20th century and women and all sorts of true concerns with policing, funding, arming them. There are officers can have sex with female that are in their custody and not get in trouble. Like, there's kooky stuff with any group, and that you could say, what's going on here? But you can't generalize about cops because they're all individuals. I know female cops. I know cops of different races than me, and old cops, or I know retired cops, and most of the people I know that are officers are really cool. And I think everybody's trying to do their best. So when we aren't careful and we just dehumanize whole groups as lazy or strong or weak or compromised, or it doesn't do anybody a service. If we need to fix policing in America, then let's fix policing. If certain officers need to be out off the beat, then they do, or held accountable, then they should be. Men, women, any race, any religion, everyone is fair game for being held accountable. But the idea that the groups are like this or like that, or people say, oh yeah, I know people from that country, they're all like this. Everybody in that nation's like that? How could that possibly be? These are ludicrous ideas. So we don't question these ideas and use critical thinking and say, well, I don't know every officer, I don't know every Mexican, I don't know every anything. So I'm not going to act like I do. Let's come back to life and reality and say, why am I peddling these ideas? These ideas don't serve me. If they don't serve me, who do they serve? That's the question. And if it's in service of a politician that's trying to hold on to power and stay out of trouble, that's information you need to know. But then again, all of a sudden now you have a responsibility. You've got to own that. You got to say, oh, wait a minute. Now I've got to pay attention to politics. Well, I don't want to. I want to pay attention to my kids and my family, which is overwhelming enough. My job, my 10 hours a day job, or my long commute, or whatever. So you can't just co-opt your civic duty to the fascists, because you won't get your freedom back. You'll lose your freedom. So there's so much more at stake than you think. It's like you want the convenience because your life is overwhelming. Yes, exactly. But the convenience you get for giving up politics and saying, hey, well, you just take care of this, is at the risk of your actual freedom. That's not hyperbolic. Germans lost their freedom in a heartbeat. What was Hitler elected in 32 and dead at 45 in 45 after killing millions and starting a world war, and where the people were not free at all, unless you were in the party, so there's always the aristocracy and the lucky ones. So being a civic minded person does take time and effort and energy, and it is a burden. But it's far better than the burden that you'd face if you weren't free anymore. The cost of not being free is way too much. And it's not just for you. Like, you have a civic duty to your children. Do you want them to be free? Your neighbor's children, people all across the nation, and as well, people across the world. The effect of losing America as a free nation and as an agent for good, geopolitically, is staggering. So we've got to consider that we kind of have to keep our minds on it. It doesn't mean we have to sit and focus on politics all the time. I don't, actually. I look at very little political news right now because Trump's already in power. It was my whole push was when we were trying to not reelect him. So, yeah, I'm not sitting here scouring the headlines, but I am paying attention. I've got like a toe in it, not even a whole foot. It's just saying, okay, this is happening. Here's the headlines. I see what's going on here, the shutdown and things like that. And you just got to notice it and keep aware of what it means to you and what you can do, whether that's voting locally or going to a No Kings protest or speaking up or challenging Trump supporting friends to consider the consequences of their actions, or to challenge any of them that have changed their minds to tell people about that and to admit that. To come clean, to vote differently next time, to spread the word. You can get the vote out, you can just educate yourself on it, or you can act locally and politically. I don't think that's the answer. Like, well, yeah, we cleaned up the streams in this county, but it's like, yeah, well, what about whether we're free, whether we have a vote, whether the secret police can come get us in the middle of the night? That matters more to me, even though I'm an environmentalist. The national thing is this story, but get involved locally to the extent that it gets you involved and interlinked with other people, and realize that you do have a civic duty. And I haven't done my civic duty in my life. I'm 50. I've not done that. I'm not trying to say from my ivory tower, come and join me in civic mindedness, but at least speaking about it, thinking about the implications of it, what it means to us matters. And we should realize that we have power. It's the same way as, like, I go past a homeless guy, I don't give him the $3 that I've got sitting here in change or whatever. Like, he needs to eat. And it's not my fault, but I could have just given him that $3. Like, what's the difference for me? So just being dialed in enough to be aware of, like, our little effect on others. And I got that guy a meal now. He ate tonight. So that little thing can have a big effect. And the same thing's true with politics, or talking about your children or your friends about what your experience is, or challenging an idea or a supposition like I'm doing with this video. And there's risk. It could put me at risk from that very cabal that runs the nation. They could say, he's one of the ones we're going to put in the gulag. So there is risk, but our nation was built on patriots taking risks, and also very self-serving patriots at that. It wasn't like Jefferson and the guys were like, yeah, we're going to not have slaves, and we're going to treat women fairly. And, this was an aristocracy where they were saying, how dare you tax me without representing me? Me. They owned people. But yet still, it was civic-minded enough to say, this isn't right, you're not going to run my world, and I'm going to fight you. And they risked and died. People died in horrible deaths to make a nation where we are free enough to sit here and pretend the fascist isn't a fascist. And that's where we are. We're at that stage where it seems like it's cool because it's been cool for so long that we think things must be okay because they've been that way and nothing could get us. So you have a sense of invincibility when you've been free for so long. There's laziness. And I've done that financially. I've done that psychologically, resting on your laurels, whatever you want to call it. What's that? So, here we are in a place where we have to wake up and nobody wants to. Because they want to go to sleep further. They want Daddy Warbucks to just take over, and it doesn't work like that. And it's not going to work like that. And we might have to actually sacrifice, like some of the folks did in Vietnam. We said, why would we go to Vietnam? They didn't do anything to us. So we're soured on war. And then the wars in the Middle East, the men and women who came back from that, scarred and damaged, we feel for them. But it was almost like it didn't happen. And same thing with Vietnam, because it wasn't here. So now we think of wars in the 20th century and beyond, that's just over there. So we don't really get the consequences of it. Now, if your husband comes home from the war messed up, then you see the consequences, or if he didn't come back or whatever. But other than that, so that's where we are is that like we might have to have some skin in the game. So the part of me that writes these things and speaks these things while he's driving to a landscaping job is part of me that says I might have to have some skin in the game. I might need to risk threat of violence or captivity from said fascists in order to speak, in order to demonstrate to people that freedom does have risks and that we stick our neck out to prove our freedom, to demonstrate it, to challenge those who would usurp our power and say, no, I'm free. I can speak my mind. I can call you a Nazi because you're being one.